Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Tenant Protection Town Hall. Before we get started, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in this afternoon's event. In order to ensure that all participants are able to access the presentation in the preferred communication language, we're providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish today. Please press the globe at the bottom of your computer screen and select your preferred language. If you're watching on a phone, please press the three dots at the bottom right of your screen and select your preferred language. Next, all lines are on mute. If you have a question, you will have the opportunity to text them into today's presenters. Please type your thoughts into the questions pane at the control panel. You may send them in at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them throughout the program. Due to time constraints, please keep all questions on topic. If you experience any technical difficulties at any point during our presentation, please explain your problem through the chat feature and we will try our best to address the issue. Lastly, we're recording this town hall and the video will be available on our YouTube page within 24 hours. Please subscribe to New Jersey OAG on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Flickr for the latest updates on news, information, and resources from our office. And now I'd like to hand things off to Rosie, who will explain this in Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Por favor, ustedes van a ver la selección en español. Está un globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Seleccionen el globo para que ustedes puedan seleccionar el canal en español. Por favor, silencien sus micrófonos cuando ustedes seleccionan después el canal. Si ustedes desean enviar un mensaje, lo pueden hacer en cualquier momento a través del chat mientras se está dando la conferencia o la reunión. Si tienen alguna dificultad técnica, también ustedes pueden enviar un mensaje a través del chat. Por favor, ustedes pueden inscribirse para hacer comentarios o ver la información de nosotros a través de Facebook, Instagram o Twitter.
Thank you. And now I'd like to hand things off to our host and moderator, Veronica Allende, Director of the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's virtual town hall, in which we will be discussing New Jersey's efforts to protect the rights of tenants. It is now my honor to introduce our first distinguished speaker, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, who will be providing some opening remarks. A special welcome to Lieutenant Governor Oliver.
Press any button.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Oh, my video is shut off. The host has asked you to start your video. Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, what has happened? Are you controlling my video? No.
There we go. You're on now.
Got it? Oh, okay.
Oh.
There we are, yes. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to the volunteer lawyers of New Jersey for teaming up with the Bureau and our other state agencies as we seek to provide information to everyone about tenant protections in New Jersey as we experience the moratorium on rent as a result of the pandemic that we have been dealing with for the past year. We know that even when it's not a pandemic, often tenants are unclear in terms of what their legal rights are, what are the intrusions upon their rights that often occur from their landlords. And we know that this is going to be more intensified because of the moratorium. I'm sure all of you yesterday experienced hearing that the Center for Disease Control at the federal level has extended the federal moratorium on rent cessation until the month of June. So the moratorium has been extended by the feds until June. In New Jersey, not only do I serve as the Lieutenant Governor, I also serve as the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. And it has been our department entrusted with the responsibility to provide rental assistance to tenants in our state. When the Congress passed the first CARES Act, COVID Relief Fund, we received funding through the feds to provide rental assistance to people in New Jersey, to tenants who had, accumulated arrearages, who had experienced a loss of income because their jobs perhaps were shut down or eliminated totally, or for those whose hours had been cut down. We know that in many households where there were working women, because of the school closures, many women were tasked with having to provide and support instruction and virtual learning at home. As a result, we've had significant numbers of tenants in our state who are confronted with arrearages. And there is protection right now because Governor Phil Murphy also issued an executive order early on in the pandemic to create a moratorium for people. It is our position, and the governor has said it repeatedly, that everyone should be helped in keeping a roof over their heads in this national emergency. This pandemic has affected every avenue of our lives. In the first amount of rental assistance that we received with the feds, we were able to provide about 15,000 families with rental assistance, whereby we paid arrearages, and in some instances, we paid the rent forward for a maximum of 12 months. You'll be hearing a little later from Janelle Winter, who operates and serves as the director of the Division of Housing and Community Resources at DCA. And she and her staff have been doing a tremendous job administering these federal funds. Now we have received an additional $353 million to do rental assistance. Janelle will describe the details of the program, how it works, what the application process is. You all know that President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan. We are now awaiting federal regulations and the rules in terms of how the states, the counties, and the municipalities are able to spend that money. We absolutely know that out of New Jersey's appropriation, not only will we be administering this emergency rental assistance program with the $353 million that we have received, but we anticipate another appropriation or set aside from our federal funding to help tenants. We are so pleased that the volunteer lawyers of New Jersey have stepped up in a tremendous way to provide legal guidance to people. I know that as Commissioner of DCA, I receive a lot of emails and telephone calls in the office from people from one end of the state to the other who don't know what their legal rights are under this moratorium. I have had to intervene on occasion with significant numbers of people in the state when their landlords have tried to illegally evict them from their apartments while this moratorium is going on. So we've got some great resource people this evening, our Attorney General, Graywall. We've got people from the various state agencies, representatives from the state police, And you will learn this evening what is allowable and what is not allowable. But I want you to know that we are laboring very hard, and we have been from the first day of the moratorium, to prepare for supporting residents in our state who will be confronted with eviction. We are working closely with the judiciary in the state, and the Justice of the Supreme Court has had his administrator meet with us with regularity to make certain we can address these issues together. I want to thank the Attorney General for extending an invitation to me this evening to participate in this forum. Know that the Murphy administration is totally committed to making certain that we can help as many people in our state as possible. And with that, I want to thank you, Jennifer, for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this town hall this evening.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, both for being here with us tonight, and also to you and to Governor Murphy for all of your efforts to ensure that New Jersey's tenants' rights are protected. Our next distinguished guest is New Jersey's 61st Attorney General, Gruber Graywall, who will also be sharing some opening remarks. Welcome, General Graywall.
Well, thank you, Director, and thank you to Lieutenant Governor Oliver for her remarks and for everything that DCA is doing. I also want to thank the Superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, Colonel Callahan, who's joined us, who will be following me for all that the state police are doing, and to congratulate them once again on the 100-year anniversary, which they celebrated yesterday. And I want to thank all the panel participants who've joined us for this evening's conversation about tenants' rights and about law enforcement responsibilities when responding to complaints of illegal lockouts. During this pandemic, we know that too many people are struggling with financial insecurity. We know that more than 1.8 million New Jerseyans have applied for unemployment since last March. For some, these struggles started well before the pandemic, but for others, their struggles have been exacerbated by it. But regardless of when they started, many households are finding it extremely difficult to cover their basic needs, including rent, because no one, absolutely no one, should be worried about keeping a roof over their head during a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Governor Murphy issued Executive Order 106 last March. The Lieutenant Governor spoke about the executive order, but it imposed a moratorium on the enforcement of eviction orders until the end of the public health emergency. The governor's actions, when combined with the similar federal moratorium, have allowed an untold number of New Jerseyans to remain in their homes during a time of crisis. But unfortunately, it appears that the eviction moratorium has had at least one unintended effect. Some landlords have taken matters into their own hands. They know that there is no legal avenue for eviction right now. And so in the most egregious of examples, some unscrupulous landlords have changed locks on tenants or shut off utilities without tenants' knowledge. All of this has left some residents unable to access their properties or belongings, and still worse, effectively rendered many homeless. These actions in the middle of a global pandemic are not just illegal, they are immoral and inhumane. Over the last several months, Colonel Callahan and I have received outreach from Volunteer Lawyers for Justice and other organizations who are working with those confronting these illegal evictions, asking for our assistance, asking for additional law enforcement guidance. At the same time, we've also received reports that there may be some confusion among law enforcement with respect to the enforcement of Executive Order 106, as well as previous guidance that had been issued by Attorney General Milgram back in 2009. That's why today I issued a new law enforcement directive to all 38,000 law enforcement officers in New Jersey, more clearly defining their responsibilities when responding to an illegal lockout call. Attorney General Directive 2021-2, which will be discussed through this evening's program, provides guidance to law enforcement regarding a law known as NJSA 2C 33-11.1. Now, this is not a new law. This bill was signed by Governor Cody in 2006, and it makes it a crime for landlords and others to remove tenants without a court order and without following lawful procedures. The law provides an especially powerful tool right now to help officers prevent illegal evictions. During the current pandemic, in addition to Directive 2020-2, in addition to the law, the directive also outlines clear and easy steps and processes for our law enforcement officers to follow when responding to reports of an illegal eviction. By issuing this directive and by educating the public this evening through this forum about the resources available to them, I think we can reduce the number of illegal evictions in our state right now and keep our residents safe during this pandemic. To be clear, that law prevents illegal evictions. The executive order and the other moratoria right now on evictions effectively says that you can't have a lawful eviction right now. That's why that law is such a powerful tool. So you'll learn more about that during this evening's program. But I want to thank once again VLJ for all the work that they've done to bring this issue to our attention, and to all the work that the law enforcement partners have done to put out this guidance. And with this, I hope we keep more of our residents safe, again, during this global pandemic. With that, let me turn it back to the director.
Thank you so much, General Graywall, and thank you for bringing so many resources together this evening so that those tuning in can learn about what they can do to protect themselves from illegal evictions. It is now my pleasure to introduce Colonel Patrick Callahan, Superintendent of the New Jersey State Police and the state's Director of Emergency Management. Welcome, Colonel Callahan.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure you can hear me, can you?
Yes.
Good there, Colonel.
Thanks so much, Director. And thanks so much for the Lieutenant Governor and the Attorney General, and to, you know, the core objectives of this call. In the middle of this global pandemic, we all understand that housing insecurity is growing. And I've had the opportunity for the last 12 plus months to be on a prayer call every morning with faith-based leaders from around the state of New Jersey. And it's been from all aspects, not only from testing to vaccinations to mortuary affairs, but, and now here we are talking about this issue, and just want to make sure that law enforcement, state police, we're responsible for 89 municipalities around the state of New Jersey as the primary law enforcement agency, and just and I think those hopefully that are on this town hall tonight understand our commitment and our dedication to this issue. And I think that the directive that the Attorney General issued today is much needed. I think sometimes there's confusion around civil and criminal issues. And I think I remember as a young trooper being called to similar issues, and it was somewhat easy to say, this is a civil matter. But now, during a global pandemic, this is not always a civil issue. This could be a criminal issue. And I think the state police, that I hope is looked to as an example of how we do things with compassion and according to the Constitution, that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're having this discussion with regards to making sure that law enforcement that is often tasked with dealing with people in crisis, that's why this is important tonight. And I think the fact that Captain De Los Santos from my office, and I think Chief Lou Bordy's on tonight, I think they'll discuss during that panel discussion to make sure that law enforcement is doing everything from all of our communities throughout the state of New Jersey to make sure that we can stop illegal evictions and in the case of repeat offenders, to certainly ensure that it doesn't happen to tenants throughout the state. So, and again, the fact that there's confusion when law enforcement is involved is not a good thing. It leads to sometimes civil unrest and folks questioning and deteriorating that public trust. So I think the fact that the Lieutenant Governor, I think the fact that the Attorney General, I think the fact that Chief Lou Bordy's on tonight, along again with Captain De Los Santos from the State Police, shows our commitment that during an unprecedented time, and a time when nobody else has ever had to deal with this global pandemic, that we just want to make sure that people who are in crisis are comforted by the fact that those who arrive to guide them through that crisis are given the proper information and are given the proper support. So I thank you to everybody who took the time to be on this call tonight, and the panelists especially. And I thank you to all of our partners throughout the state that are involved in protecting tenants' rights. And again, I'm humbled and honored. It's been a long 12 plus months, but I'm honored to work shoulder to shoulder with all of our partners, federal, state, county, local, and certainly our tenants are certainly amongst those partners to make sure that their rights are protected. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Veronica Allende, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Colonel, not just for being here with us tonight, but also for your leadership, particularly in the past year that has been so challenging to all of us in law enforcement and to the New Jersey community. But we thank you for being here this evening with us. All right, everyone. We will now turn our program over to our fantastic panelists who come from a variety of departments and agencies across the state, but who are all equally dedicated to ensuring that New Jerseyans are protected from unlawful evictions, particularly with all of the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I see that they are arriving on the screen. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and the offices or agencies that they work for. And I will start first with, from the Office of Attorney General, Bryn Whittle.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Veronica. Just want to say good evening to all assembled tonight. My name is Bryn Whittle. I am the Director of Community Engagement with the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General. I serve as a liaison between community stakeholders and our office. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryn. I'm going to now ask Rebecca Rhodes from the Department of Community Affairs. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rebecca Rhodes from the Office of Homelessness Prevention, which is within the Division of Housing and Community Resources, and that's within the Department of Community Affairs.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for being with us tonight. And also from the Department of Community Affairs, we have Janelle Winters. Oh, Winter, excuse me.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the Director of the Division of Housing and Community Resources at the Department of Community Affairs. We are the state's housing agency. We operate the state's rental assistance programs, including the programs that the Lieutenant Governor mentioned tonight. as well as many of the state's homeless prevention programs.
Thank you, Janelle. All right, moving on, we have Aaron Scherzer from our Division on Civil Rights. Aaron, good evening.
Good evening, thank you, Director. I am Aaron Scherzer. I'm the Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Enforcement at the Division on Civil Rights, which is the state agency responsible for enforcing the New Jersey law against discrimination, the state statute that prohibits discrimination and harassment in housing as well as in employment and places of public accommodation.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for being with us tonight. Moving on, we'll move on to the New Jersey State Police. We have with us this evening Captain Domingo de los Santos. Captain?
Good evening, Captain Domingo de los Santos from the State Police. I work alongside Colonel Callahan, and I am currently assigned to the office of the Deputy Superintendent, and obviously thrilled and excited to be a part of this panel to assist in obviously the topic today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Captain. And from the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police, we have with us this evening Chief Lou Bordy. Chief?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lou Bordy. I'm the Chief of Police from Voorhees Township in Camden County, and I'm the current president for the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police, and I represent the almost 500 chiefs across New Jersey. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chief. And last but certainly not least, we have from Volunteer Lawyers for Justice, Jessica Kitson. Jessica?
Good evening, and thank you, Director Allende. My name is Jessica Kitson. I'm Senior Managing Attorney at Volunteer Lawyers for Justice. We're a nonprofit organization providing free civil legal aid throughout New Jersey. And we've been working on behalf of a coalition of advocates from a variety of organizations and agencies throughout the state on advocacy relating to tenants' rights for the past year. And so thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for bringing this to our forefront here. So we have a ton of questions that we're going to be going through the different panelists. But before we do get started with our actual panelist discussion, going through some of those questions, I would like to take a few moments to first provide some background on what brings us all here tonight, starting with a very brief background on Governor Murphy's Executive Order 106, and also by providing an overview of Attorney General Graywall's newly issued Directive 2021-2. So first, Governor Murphy, understanding, of course, that the economic impacts of COVID-19 have been significant and, of course, pose a growing threat to the housing security of many New Jerseyans, issued Executive Order 106 on March 19th of 2020. EO 126 protects lessees, tenants, and homeowners from being removed from a residential property as a result of an eviction or foreclosure. Now, while EO 106 is in effect, evictions and foreclosures may be initiated or continued, but enforcement are stayed. There is, however, one exemption, and that would be if a court orders the eviction in the interest of justice. EO 126 further provides that sheriffs, court officers, and others are forbidden from removing individuals from residential properties through evictions or foreclosure processes unless under a court order to do so. And while EO 126 defined what was considered to be a residential property for purposes of the executive order, it gave discretion to Colonel Callahan as the state's Director of Emergency Management to supplement that definition. And in fact, in New Jersey Office of Emergency Management Administrative Order number 2020-9, Colonel Callahan did just that, extending EO 106's protections to individuals who have no permanent housing to which they may safely or lawfully return and live at a hotel or motel on a continual basis. So this basically had the practical effect of protecting the state's most vulnerable individuals from being turned out into the street. Now, while Governor Murphy and Colonel Callahan, as well, of course, as we've mentioned earlier, the federal government, have taken significant measures to allow untold New Jerseyans to remain in their homes during the COVID-19 health crisis with the moratoria, some landlords, as Attorney General Graywall mentioned, have taken matters into their own hands. In some cases, having taken measures that have left residents unable to access their properties and effectively rendering them homeless. With Directive 2021-2, Attorney General Graywall recognizes that law enforcement agencies have an important role in preventing these types of illegal evictions. That role includes enforcing the currently enacted law, New Jersey Statute Annotated, we call it Section 2C 33-11.1. And that particular statute contains two very important provisions. First, only an officer of the court can execute an eviction order, which is formally referred to as executing a warrant for possession. Second, it is either a disorderly persons offense or a crime for landlords and others to evict residents using any other means, including illegal lockouts. So broadly speaking, this particular law prohibits two types of conduct: illegal evictions and refusals to allow illegally evicted residents to immediately re-enter their homes. However, unlike so many other offenses that we have, officers cannot charge a person with violating this law unless that person has been previously warned by the officer or another public official about the illegality of their conduct. Now, because a warning is first required before a person can be charged with violating this law, officers must take additional measures before they can issue a complaint summons to any individuals or individuals responsible for the illegal eviction. This new directive outlines a 4-step process that law enforcement officers must follow when responding to a report of an illegal eviction. Step 1 is first, when officers arrive at the scene, they should attempt to determine the basic facts regarding the eviction or the threatened eviction. And the directive provides a list of questions that officers should seek answers to in determining these facts. And those questions are going to include: what is the residential property in question? Who is the property's occupant and who's actually doing the evicting? Is the occupant no longer able to access their property? Has the evicting party removed the occupant in compliance with the state's lawful eviction procedures? What steps have been taken by the evicting party in order to remove the occupant? And those are just some of the questions that law enforcement officers should be asking when they arrive on the scene. However, officers should not be providing legal advice to tenants or other parties, but should rather encourage individuals to contact legal services in New Jersey if they cannot afford private counsel. So that's basically step 1. Step 2 is if the officers do identify potential violations of section 33-11.1, the law I referenced earlier, they should they should promptly issue warnings to the responsible parties. Step 3 is if the officers determine that a tenant was in fact illegally evicted, then they should ensure that that tenant is immediately restored to their residence. The law is very clear that the tenant should be restored to their residence without delay, so the officers should ensure that the process take no longer than absolutely necessary to be completed. Additionally, the law states that officers have an affirmative duty to prevent the landlord or any other persons from obstructing or hindering the reentry and reoccupancy of the dwelling. So if the evicting party has used obstructions such as padlocks or any other obstructive measure, the officers should ensure that the evicting party has remediated those obstructive measures that were taken. And finally, step 4. If the warned individuals refuse to comply with requirements of section 33-11.1, then the officers should promptly charge those individuals by complaint summonses. In most instances, the defendant will be charged with a disorderly persons offense. But if the defendant has previously been convicted of a violation of the same law during the past 5 years, then the violation is charged as a 4th-degree crime. If, however, the individual or the defendant or the individual who's seeking to evict the other occupants, if they make a good faith effort to restore the illegally evicted occupant to their residence, then the officer doesn't have to charge the person. And also just a reminder to law enforcement officers that while they are going to be seeking a potential violation or investigating a potential violation of the actual section 33-11.1, we do still have Executive Order 106, and there may be an EO 106 violation there as well. By following these simple steps, law enforcement officers can ensure compliance with the law and protect tenants from illegal evictions. And so that is a basic overview of the Attorney General's newly issued directive 2021-2. And because this affects law enforcement officers, I'm going to now turn our panel discussion to our 2 law enforcement officer representatives, Captain De Los Santos and of course, Chief Bordy, and ask you first, what role does law enforcement play when a call comes in about a tenant eviction? And I guess I can start with Captain De Los Santos and then maybe move on to Chief Bordy. Captain?
Thank you, Veronica. The one thing, obviously, that as members of the law enforcement community, we want to ensure the safety of our citizens. And in this case, especially those affected by illegal evictions or lockouts. The directive that you clearly delineated a few minutes ago, it's a comprehensive guidance, 4-step process for police officers that are responding to the calls for service from tenants that have been illegally locked out. And at the same time, it clears any confusions. Via this panel, via this town hall, what we're asking, obviously, those that have joined us, is for anyone that is affected by these issues to please reach out for assistance to the state police, to the local departments, like Chief Bordy initially said at the beginning. It's a team effort. It's a team effort by all law enforcement agencies within New Jersey to tackle this issue.
Thank you, Captain. Chief, would you like to add anything?
Sure. When the police officers get there, a primary function is to restore order, as the captain alluded to, and educate not just the illegally evicted tenant, but also educate the landlord. That's a significant step in the process for us, and that to have a good documentation when we're done there, and obviously connecting both parties with services to try and avoid a similar situation or a recall at that residence for the same thing. That would be the goal, to have enough communication and conversation while you're there and gain compliance and understanding from everybody so we wouldn't have to go back again. And the follow-up again would be the reporting, because that could be crucial if we have to go back again. And in maybe even a bigger piece is connection to services and referrals for everybody involved. If we could accomplish that at every one of these calls, I would say we would have a better chance of not getting recalled there. So that would be the goal in my mind.
Thank you so much, Chief. And to both you and Captain De Los Santos, how has COVID-19 changed the ways in which law enforcement officers are involved in eviction matters?
Well, I can jump in. I can tell you that we're all the different safety precautions, not just for us, but for the people that we deal with. The last thing we want to be is a conduit for spreading something or actually getting it from while we're there. People have been traumatized over the last 12 months with this, many different ways. People are afraid. They want normalcy back. And so, a lot of people end up at their wits' end. So it's been difficult, but we have a lot of support, law enforcement, from the Attorney General's office and our partnerships. So we're working through it.
Thank you, Chief. Captain, anything to add?
Echoing what the chief said, we are obviously taking the necessary precautions, obviously with our troopers, to answer obviously all calls for service. And obviously the situation is no different. We obviously, if presented with a situation as delineated within this directive, we will gladly respond and ensure obviously our citizens that we are here. We are here to ensure that their needs are met, and obviously that we respond to their calls for need. Obviously doing so safely.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to turn our next question over to Jessica Kitson at VLJ, Volunteer Lawyers for Justice. Jessica, can you talk a little bit about what you wish law enforcement knew about helping tenants for our law enforcement officers listening in today?
Absolutely. You know, I think what I most want folks to know is that the tenants we are talking with are, they're overwhelmed, they are confused, and they're terrified, right? I mean, eviction under any circumstances is a terrifying proposition. It is completely displacing themselves, their families, and has adverse effects that go well beyond where someone is living, even under the best of circumstances. And I think we can all agree that COVID-19 is far, far from the best of circumstances. And there's been a lot of recognizing tonight that there's been some confusion over the past year about what role law enforcement plays. And I can assure you that that confusion is shared by tenants. And so I think you know, the idea of helping to educate everybody, to make sure that folks know that eviction has to be through a court process, and that they are entitled to stay in their home, and that regardless of some of the threats and the harassment that they might be experiencing, or the padlocks in the worst case scenario, that they do have a right to stay in their home, and that there is a court process that must be followed. I think that you can't underestimate really what a tremendous impact that will be for law enforcement to continue to reinforce those ideas to the tenants.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And along those same lines, I guess back to Captain and Chief, what information do you find helpful for a tenant to provide to law enforcement when the officer arrives on the scene? What would be helpful for law enforcement to know upon arriving at the scene? I know we have some questions in the directive, but is there any other information that that would be helpful from the tenants to law enforcement? So really any background information, who lives there is going to be very important, who has a right to be there, who shouldn't be there. They're all important things. Because of the executive order, you know, there's so few circumstances where someone should be removed. That kind of makes it easier for us in a sense that 99 times out of 100 or more, there should be, if someone's been removed, we'll be getting them re-entry back into the house. Just being able to get a bigger picture when they're there, maybe leading up to why or what happened. To me, and I know a lot of my colleagues, the connection to services is significant. And there's a lot of avenues that many of our residents in New Jersey just don't know that there's help there for them. So if they're struggling, if they're food insecure and things like that, just the additional things that could go along with that type of traumatic incident would be nice to know, so we can help maybe settle down a situation and get it stabilized for them. Okay. Captain, anything you'd like to add?
In addition, I would say any documentation that they might have received from the landlord, any lease, anything that they might have, obviously, that can obviously confirm, obviously, their residence and maybe ongoing issues that might have been happening with this landlord. That can also help clarify the situation. Contact number or information for the prospective landlord can also obviously assist to mediate and clear up any misunderstandings that might be going on and allow us to take further action.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to go back to Jessica for a moment. Jessica, did you have something to add before?
I just wanted to add quickly that I just want folks to keep in mind, I think certainly getting the contact information for the landlord is going to be key. Other documents, unfortunately, very often are in the very apartment that the tenant has been removed from. And so it's sometimes, I just want to make sure that folks understand that that's not always going to be possible, but I don't want to speak on behalf of every advocate that I think is watching right now, but I think we all agree that whenever possible, we are encouraging tenants to provide as much documentation as they can to help you all out.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jessica. So I guess starting out for our, the individuals tuning in is, what, Jessica, would you say is the first call tenant should make when faced with an eviction? Is it to the lawyer? Is it to an advocacy group? Is it to law enforcement? What would your recommendation be? And I actually open this up to some of the other panelists too to chime in, starting with Jessica.
Sure. I mean, right, we want all tenants facing eviction to have access to legal counsel. So of course, we always welcome folks to contact Volunteer Lawyers for Justice, Legal Services of New Jersey, Community Health Law Project, all of the different great organizations that exist across the state. However, when there's an immediate emergency and someone facing eviction, our recommendation is that ideally the person will contact law enforcement, because we believe that law enforcement's in the best position to help restore the person to their home. I also want to say, though, that we have to recognize that not all of our community members are necessarily going to feel as comfortable reaching out to law enforcement. And so I think that there's also some work that we can do and brainstorm ideas on how to make the relief and the services available across the board. But our first piece of advice when someone contacts us is you should call your local police department. That is your best and first recourse when facing an immediate lockout.
Thank you so
much. We would like to
Jessica.
not go through the court process, right? I mean, there is a court process, and Mr. Garner from the judiciary has been posting in the chat, and I think there's some great resources there about how you can go through the court process, which is very important. But our goal is for folks to not have to go to court to enforce their rights. Sure. They should just not be removed from their home.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go to DCA, our DCA representatives, and ask a few questions here too. What eviction programs does DCA offer to assist individuals kind of on an ongoing basis? And then if you could also answer if you have any for homeless or special needs population would be helpful also.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.
I'll start off. In terms of assistance with eviction, in a big way, the role that DCA plays is to provide support and assistance in paying off arrears and in paying rent and in helping people avoid the situation. We do, however, operate the eviction moratorium information website, which is linked from DCA's website, which is nj.gov/DCA. And that provides information on the eviction moratorium and on tenants' rights during it, and also is a question form where people can submit questions and a member of our staff will respond to them. It's not meant to be used in an emergency, as my colleague mentioned, in the moment of an illegal eviction, contacting law enforcement is the way to go. But for someone who's concerned, thinks their landlord might be planning to do something that they don't think they should, or even a landlord who's wondering what they can and can't do, can provide a good resource to know what can happen during this time. And I think the other things that DCA provides are programs for people who are having trouble paying their rent, are in danger of eviction, and also for people who are homeless or who have special needs. One of the largest programs we're operating right now is, as Lieutenant Governor mentioned, the CVRAP, the COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We operated the first phase of this last year, and just this Monday, we have opened up for pre-applications for the second phase, and we'll be providing more than $350 million in payments that will help pay off arrears and future rent. So that is a large resource that's available. The application for that, which is a very simple application, is available on the website of DCA. I think we're also putting in the chat the link to the website, and we encourage everyone to apply. That site is open right now. We will be taking applications, and then on a rolling basis, we'll be conducting a lottery and selecting people and asking for full applications. And what you can receive through that is up to 12 months of assistance. So if you have 12 months of rental arrears, we can pay that back. If you have 6 months of arrears, but you have need of 6 months rent going forward, we can pay it that way too. So that's one of the biggest resources that we have available right now. Some of the other programs that we have, and I know Rebecca Rhodes, who's our director of the Office on Homelessness Prevention at DCA, will be speaking to in more detail, are some programs for people who are homeless. We've put more than $30 million in additional funding into our rapid rehousing program, which provides people who are homeless with 12 months of rental assistance, plus a security deposit and move-in assistance. So for people who are currently homeless, this will help them get into housing and stay in back on their feet after a year. We're accepting referrals there through the county continuums of care and also direct referrals as well. DCA also has a variety of other programs, including help in paying off utility arrears and ongoing utility bills. And if anyone is interested there, we encourage you to go through the DCA website to our tool that's called DC Aid. There you answer a few questions about your income, where you live, your family size, and it will link you with all the programs that you may be eligible for through DCA. And we encourage you to apply for all of those. We want to provide as much assistance as possible right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Rebecca, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things here. Janelle did a great job giving an overview. I'm thinking of the situation of someone facing this situation of being locked out. And in that moment, most of our programs, as Janelle said, are not emergency programs that they can call right at that point. I can think of, I don't know if this happens at times, but I could see where someone has been locked out. And if the police were there to respond, there might be a household that is concerned about returning, doesn't want to go back to that place, even if they legally have the right to, or otherwise the police, they're not turning to police, they may be turning to another avenue or might be going somewhere else. In that kind of emergency where it's in the moment, I just wanted to mention that if it's after hours, they really want to call 211. And at that point, if they cannot access their apartment, if they cannot get back in or their home, then they can find a place to stay for that evening. And that's in a more emergency situation. That's actually part of the Department of Human Services under DFD, but 211 is really the number to call if it's a very urgent situation and you need assistance right there. And then the other thing is there are a lot of the DCA dollars are really administered at the local level. So each county has resources available. So, and that's usually how people are accessing assistance if they're experiencing homelessness. But I just want to say during business hours, they should go to the Board of Social Services for assistance. And if the police during the situation, if they're there, could assist them, that's something that may be helpful, or assist them to make a phone call in the circumstances where I think someone said, you know, maybe it was, I don't know who it was, but 1% of the cases cannot be resolved or they cannot be returned. For whatever reason, someone can't be returned. I think that's the first stop, is really to call 211 or to go to the Board of Social Services. And in addition, in the chat, you will also see some of the homeless prevention programs, including within the link that's there, where locally you can access those resources for the rapid rehousing Janelle referred to.
Okay, thank you so much, both Janelle and Rebecca, for sharing those. And I know our comms team has been very much active on the chat with giving the different websites to all of the different programs and links that Janelle and Rebecca both mentioned. So to those tuning in, please make sure you guys are checking the chat for that information. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Scherzer over from DCR and ask Aaron, if you can just talk a little bit about some of the services that the Division on Civil Rights offers to tenants who are facing eviction. Love to get your take on that.
Great, thank you, Director, and thanks again for having me on this panel. We know how important this is because the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated longstanding inequalities in access to stable housing. So the Division on Civil Rights is committed to addressing the eviction crisis. As I mentioned, the Division on Civil Rights enforces the New Jersey law against discrimination, and that law makes it unlawful for a landlord to discriminate or harass a tenant because of their race, their religion, their national origin, or because they are receiving government rental assistance like Section 8 or COVID-19 emergency rental assistance. And I saw someone had a question about that in the chat. So as relevant here, it's unlawful for a landlord to evict, threaten to evict, lock out, or cut the utilities of a tenant because of their race, their religion, their national origin, or because the tenant receives government rental assistance, like I mentioned, and that includes Section 8, and it also includes the COVID-19 emergency rental assistance program that my colleagues at DCA just mentioned. So what someone can do if they've think they've been discriminated against is they can file a complaint with DCR. And we now have a new online filing system called NJ Bias, which allows individuals to file a complaint directly with the Division on Civil Rights on our website. And I think Whitney and Tara are going to put this into the chat, but there are two ways to file a complaint with DCR. You can visit our website, which is njcivilrights.gov. Thank you, Whitney. And click on the button that says file a civil rights complaint. It's right at the top of the page. And our online filing system, NJ Bias, as I mentioned, that's available in both English and Spanish. And if you aren't able to access that online system, you can call us directly. Our phone number, and I think Whitney will also put this in the chat, is 833-NJ-DCR-4U. 833-NJ-DCR-4U.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Now, Aaron, we do have a specific question: is what should someone do if they are experiencing rental discrimination because they may be receiving housing assistance such as Section 8?
Thank you. So someone who is experiencing that rental discrimination because of government rental assistance, which includes Section 8, should file a complaint, can file a complaint with the Division on Civil Rights. That's a big source of our focus in the past year. The Attorney General recently announced our initiative on that to combat source of lawful income discrimination, called the Project Home Initiative, where we had investigated numerous instances of source of lawful income discrimination. And so that is, if someone is being discriminated against because of the source of income that they're using to pay their rent, and as the question asked about, Section 8 is certainly one of those types of source of lawful income, that is unlawful under the law against discrimination, and any individual who is experiencing that can file a complaint with the Division on Civil Rights in the two ways I just mentioned, by visiting our website, njcivilrights.gov, and clicking on File a Civil Rights Complaint, or by calling us at 833-NJ-DCR-4U.
And so, Aaron, when DCR receives a complaint, they initiate an investigation. Are DCR's resources only available when there's an active investigation, or are there other resources that DCR has available under different circumstances?
That's a great question. So we just recently, the statute requires us to prevent and eliminate discrimination in New Jersey. So we are responsible for investigating individual complaints, but we also work on proactive initiatives, some policy and legislative initiatives, but also we just launched a new community relations unit that launched with a number of new community relations specialists 2 weeks ago. So that is very exciting, and they will be working very closely with community members around the state. And we have also just launched an education and training unit to provide more proactive education to employers, to housing providers, to places of public accommodation like schools and hospitals about the protections under the law against discrimination. So we have both the investigative function of investigating individual complaints, but we also have a number of proactive efforts that we are taking to try to address not just housing discrimination, but also discrimination in employment and in places of public accommodation.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I'm going to turn it over to the larger group. A few questions specifically more related to COVID and how COVID has really had an impact on housing and the evictions situation that we have throughout the state. So I guess first to law enforcement, our law enforcement officers, have we noticed an uptick in actions because of COVID-19 in these types of inactions?
I think it's been reported around the state, Veronica, that there has been this uptick, which has caused the clarification for us and some extra training. So I can tell you locally, maybe not, but I've definitely heard about it around the state.
Okay. And I guess has COVID, to Jessica, have you noticed that COVID-19 has exacerbated existing problems within the housing?
Sorry.
There you go.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So vulnerable communities in New Jersey were already living paycheck to paycheck and things were precarious to begin with. So it didn't take much, right? One month of not even losing a job, but decreased hours at work really would be all it would take to put folks into a very bad situation. And then you add on top of it COVID itself. And so we have clients who have, had COVID run through their entire family, which has just made matters incredibly worse. And also increases the fear factor, right? Of being displaced, possibly having to go into a shelter, at a time when the last thing you want to do is be in close proximity to a lot of people. And so COVID has definitely taken a difficult situation and made it very bad. And to the point of illegal lockouts, advocates are reporting seeing numbers of clients who are facing this unlike anything we've ever seen. So it was illegal before, it was happening at times before, but nothing on the scale like what we've been seeing in the last year.
Thank you, Jessica. And I guess I open this up to all the members of the panel. What are some of the common or frequent complaints or inquiries that, one, Jessica, you might be receiving from tenants in your representation of them, or anybody calling in to DCA or DCR or to law enforcement? What are some of the common or frequent, I guess, complaints or inquiries that you're receiving?
Sorry, was that to me again? Sorry.
I'll start with you, and then any of the other panelists are welcome to
yeah, we're seeing a lot of different things. And one thing I want to highlight is I think a lot of attention gets paid to the padlock has been mentioned and people physically removed, but we are seeing utility shutoffs at a very alarming rate, especially in the winter months, but it should never be happening. And that is a violation. That is a form of an illegal lockout that needs to be addressed, and folks need to know that they can reach out and get assistance when that happens. But I also think we're seeing threats of lockouts, and folks don't know what to do in those instances, right? Many times we have tenants who they don't want to have a bad relationship with their landlord. They want to make things work and they're confused. They don't know. And someone says, well, I'm going to lock you out if you don't leave. And so what's the choice there? Do you wait until a Friday night and see whether or not it happens, and then it's the weekend and what do you do? Or do you leave and make other arrangements because you think it might? And so again, that's why this education campaign is so very important, that folks know that it is never okay for a landlord to lock you out, that it's always something that has to go through the court process.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Any other panelists as far as things that you're seeing or calls that you're getting in, any trends?
There have been some reports I've received of rents going up in specific areas, so that they try to increase above the FMR rates so that they do not need to perhaps rent to people who need to find an apartment that is going to be in a fair market rent rate. So there have been people reporting that they have seen a really big increase. I think where I was hearing it, and it was some of the more rural areas in southern New Jersey, where they really had overall, it just seemed like a lot of people were landlords were increasing their rents. And in addition to that, also just making credit ratings making them much higher. So trying to look, I think, for ways to further exclude people from what's already a really low number of rental units available out there.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Right. Now I know that, Janelle, did you have something to add?
Sure. I just wanted to say that a lot of the calls that we get are tenants wondering about their rights, and they aren't necessarily specifically related to the eviction moratorium or the pandemic. A lot of people are concerned about just things that are not allowed in normal times in terms of evictions and in terms of how landlords have to legally proceed. So I think that's really important that we really, have events like this to make sure that people are aware of their rights at all times, because there is a process for evictions. Even when there isn't a moratorium, a landlord can't just simply come to you and say, time to go, you have to get out. They have to follow a legal process. They have to go through that. They can't just do it themselves. And so I think that's really important. A lot of the questions we see deal with things that are illegal at all times, not just during the public health emergency. And then I think the other thing that we see too is people looking for assistance. Again, being aware that right now there is a moratorium, but what's going to happen in the future? And so that's why we encourage people right now with utilities and rental assistance to apply for the programs that exist so that we can start to help people as much as we can, come through and get ready for the recovery as we all reopen.
Thanks so much, Janelle. And I know earlier tonight you provided a number of different websites, as did Erin and Jessica, I believe, on how tenants can be educated on their rights. Is there anything else that we might be able to provide people tuning in today? Any other additional resources or websites that we can point them to so that they could look up some of these on their own in the aftermath of tonight? Or do you think we have them covered?
I think we have them covered. DCA also has a handbook for tenants on their rights, and we can provide that link as well.
Thank you so much. And I guess the other question is, how do we reach communities where English may not be the primary language? I mean, I know, thankfully, our team today was able to get a translator for those who speak Spanish, and we have our Spanish channel that's hopefully tuning in today. But for others where English is not the primary language, how do we reach those communities? I open that up to all the panelists.
So speaking for DCA, one of the things that we try and make sure we do is provide our materials and especially our applications, but all our materials in a variety of languages. The call center is staffed with English and Spanish speakers, and we also have translation services for other languages. And we are providing the materials in several different languages. I think we also have to reach out to our community-based groups who might work with a lot of these communities and really be the trusted broker with these communities, the people who really have the credibility, and work with those groups to make sure that we're letting them know about the resources that are available so they can tell the folks who are going to come to them first about where these resources are and how they can access them.
And if I could add, Janelle pretty much hit the nail on the head. Our community stakeholders, our partners are very valuable in that process. When we rolled out the Immigrant Trust Directive, that's basically the model that we followed, reaching out to active advocacy organizations and partnering with them and, meeting them where they were at. Whether it was a house of worship, in the age of COVID, we were doing a lot of virtual sessions, whether it's by phone, you know, using translation services. So we are here to support and to help however we can.
Thanks so much. And Bryn, you are my next up because I have a few questions for you as our Director of Community Engagement. Tonight, we have heard from our fantastic panelists about the number of resources that are available. And I ask you, Bryn, you know, you often field calls from community groups as well as law enforcement. And what is your advice to tenants or community groups who are assisting tenants as they navigate all the various resources and departments?
Well, thank you. Thank you. That is an excellent question. First off, it is to really understand that this event tonight, as well as the directive, was a bold step on behalf of the Attorney General's office. You know, because we recognize that it was not enough just to say constructive or self-help evictions are illegal. We needed to put a little teeth behind that. And so we've done that, and we're committed to getting this message out there. You know, Aaron mentioned we launched Project Home, and we are always partnering with our colleagues at DCA and now with Volunteer Lawyers for Justice to make sure that we get the message out there that resources are available. So to tenants who find themselves in this precarious situation, I say, you know, during this moratorium, I know it's difficult, but reach out for assistance. You know, we've outlined some of the resources that are out there today, but, you know, take hold of it and follow up and follow through. And, you know, law enforcement, should it get to that point where you're facing an illegal lockout, we've given them the tools of how to assist you. And so don't be bashful or afraid to reach out because that's what we're here to do. This is what's considered 21st century community policing.
Thanks so much, Bryn. And, you know, we're very fortunate that we have the opportunity to host and to attend virtual events like this one this evening. For members of the public who aren't able to join these virtual events, I guess the question is, what's the best way to get the message out on our programs, on the programs that are offered by DCA and on the help that VLJ is able to provide in DCR, of course?
We rely very heavily on, you know, credible voices that are in the communities. So I spend quite a lot of time reaching out to faith leaders. They have been wonderful, especially during the pandemic, of getting information out to their communities. Oftentimes, people turn to them during crisis. You know, they may not be that interested in attending church otherwise, but during a crisis, you know, you need help. So arming them with the information, getting the information out to even the schools and other stakeholders who are available, some of our elected officials, making sure that they have the information, because those are the people that, you know, people in crisis turn to when you're facing a difficult situation. So making sure that we arm them with the appropriate information and tools.
Thanks so much, Bryn. And so, you know, at the outset, we talked about law enforcement officers responding, and I believe Jessica gave the advice that if it's in a very emergent situation that we want to get in contact with our law enforcement officers. And we're really thankful tonight because not only do we have our Chief Lou Bordy from the State Chiefs of Police Association, but we also have Captain De Los Santos from State Police. And it's important for Captain De Los Santos to be here because as people may not know, there's not always a local police department for someone to call. Sometimes there are areas in New Jersey that are policed exclusively by the New Jersey State Police. And so for those areas that don't have a local police department, Captain, how should they best get in contact with the New Jersey State Police?
Well, like the Colonel Callahan mentioned earlier, so we have 89 municipalities that we cover, and this panel has offered a ton of information. The panel has been amazing. as I'm sitting here listening to the information provided, it is now our duty to take some of this information and relay it to obviously our stations that cover these general policing areas in order to ensure that the information gets relayed out there to our troopers, and in turn give those tenants that are affected by this, some guidance and some assistance, obviously, in these matters. So.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to turn over to Janelle Winter just for a moment. So Janelle, what is the maximum number for the lottery? And if you can explain a little bit about what that is.
So the way in which that works is, while $353 million is a lot of money, when you think about arrears and rent, that can add up quickly. And our concern is that we anticipate that there will be more people who need this assistance than we'll be able to serve. So what we are going to do is we accept pre-applications, both over the website and then over the phone for those who don't have internet access. And once we receive a certain number, we do a lottery draw. We pull a certain number of people that we think we would be able to serve quickly. And we send them information to put in a full application. And then we, if they're eligible for the program, as we do that, then we pay out that assistance. But we're leaving the application open to continue taking new applications. And then a couple of weeks after the first lottery draw, we will do another. And we'll continue doing this until we've allocated all of the funds that are available. And we anticipate that once this $353 million is gone, the American Rescue Plan Act, we anticipate we're going to receive another tranche of funds for arrears and rental assistance from that as well. So even if someone isn't served with this first pool of assistance, we may be able to get to them with the next pool. So people should apply and be aware that you might not be contacted right away. You might be contacted in a couple of weeks. It might be a month or 6 weeks before you're contacted. But when we contact you, we absolutely want you to give us all the information we ask for. And we do our best to keep that information down. It's a federal program, so there are some requirements. The good thing about the program this year is it will accept a lot of self-certification. We know sometimes somebody might have lost a job, but they don't have unemployment yet. Or maybe they were driving for Uber and there's no one's taking that right now. Cleaning houses and, they're not getting into people's homes right now, but you don't really have a letter saying that that's the case. In those cases, people can do what's called self-certify, where we have a form that they just tell us what the reason is that they are, in these straits, and they sign it. And then that's what we use to document that. So we're trying to make the process as easy as possible. And that's how the lottery will work. So there will be, shortly we will do the first lottery draw, and then we'll continue doing it until all of the funds are encumbered.
Thank you so much, Janelle. And I know we're a little all over the place. We have a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm trying to field them as they're coming in. I'm going to turn the next one over to Jessica. Jessica, what about landlords selling the property while people are renting during the pandemic? And what are they allowed to sell? Are they allowed to sell the property? And what are people in that situation permitted to do, or allowed to do, or should do?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of questions about can my landlord show the property? Especially, I'm nervous about having people in. So there's no law specifically saying that a landlord has a right to do that, but in most instances, in most written leases, there is going to be a provision that gives the landlord the right to do that. And so that's going to be what prevails. We hope that there's communication and common sense and notice and safety taken into account, but that's not always the case. That's a situation where I would definitely, if you're having a problem with your landlord of that, try and speak to an attorney. I'm going to put the number again in the chat there. If I could though, just real quick, because I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat asking questions, and I want to make sure there's no confusion here. There are some instances in which the court is moving forward with hearings. And so I don't want folks to ignore notices from the court. If you're getting something from the court saying there's an order to show cause or you have a hearing, please go to the hearing. please try and speak with an attorney before you go to that hearing. So yes, there's a moratorium. Yes, most non-payment cases are not moving forward in the courts right now, but there are some exceptions, and you should not ignore anything from the court because you could get a judgment against you. And that's the very last thing that we want to have happen right now.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Really important to note that. You know, we are getting some questions in reporting that a lot of tenants, I think, Jessica, this speaks to what you talked about earlier, of getting these complaints in that are been exacerbated during COVID, which is that a lot of tenants are reporting that police did not help when they were contacted. And the questions are, what is being done for all local police departments to be aware of what they should do in the situation? Well, this is exactly why Attorney General Graywall issued Directive 2021-2 today. It was an opportunity for us to give clarity to law enforcement officers throughout the state, both local and our state police, and our law enforcement officers to understand exactly what they should be doing under those circumstances, and that they, you know, that they should be taking these circumstances and these situations very seriously. Moreover, the directive, we didn't just issue it, we sent it directly to all the law enforcement agency heads earlier today. And Attorney General Graywall also hosted a call with all of the chiefs of police throughout the state of New Jersey this morning to explain the new directive and all of the new protocols within the directive. And so we're thankful that this directive came out today, and we are hopeful that law enforcement officers will now be very clear on what is required under both the Attorney General directive and also the law, and of course, EO 126, which I mentioned earlier. So we have another question with regard that just came in, which is, what are the rights of undocumented tenants, and what happens if a landlord tries to convince the police that they should be deported? And I'll turn it over to Bryn if you want to touch on this question and perhaps our the Immigrant Trust Directive and how this kind of plays, they interplay.
So, yes, I saw that question as well. And again, I mentioned earlier the Immigrant Trust Directive, which is a directive that gives guidance to law enforcement in terms of how to handle situations with undocumented immigrants. You know, if that's the case, that someone is undocumented, you know, the person does not have to worry about deportation when they're faced with an eviction matter. That's a separate matter. And again, the law enforcement will follow this new directive in assisting the tenant to get back into their home.
Thanks so much, Bryn. And of course, individuals who may be experiencing this issue can follow up with Jessica, our office, for more information on that as well. So we are just about closing time for our panel today, but before we do conclude, and before I thank all of our panelists for joining us this evening, is there any other comment or anything else that our viewers should be aware of from all of the panelists this evening? Is there anything else that we need to cover? I know we went through a lot today, but I know we could all be talking about this topic for many, many hours. But is there anything else that we should be letting our viewers know this evening? All right. I can't see all of you right now the way I have my screen set up. So I'll do the lawyer thing. Seeing no show of hands. I just appreciate everybody joining this panel discussion tonight. I think it was tremendously educational for individuals through New Jersey to understand their rights, for law enforcement tuning in as far as what the new directive now requires for the law. And just thank you to DCA, to DCR, to the State Chiefs of Police Association through Chief Forty, and also the State Police through Captain De Los Santos. Of course, Jessica Kitson from VLJ, we're just thankful that you were able to join with us today. And last but not least, of course, Bryn Whittle, our Director of Community Engagement at OAG. We're very lucky to have her. And to our communications department for putting this together and allowing, of course, the translation for some of our Spanish speaking viewers. So to all of you, I wish you a good evening. I thank you for attending this evening on behalf of the Attorney General's office, and we wish you a safe and healthy evening. Take care.
Bye.